It started with a drizzle, just a light, friendly tap-tap-tap on the windows of room 12, where Ms. Carson's class was in the middle of their totally fascinating, mind-numbing math lesson. For most classrooms, rain meant staying indoors, sighing dramatically, and suffering through extra worksheets. But in this classroom where most of us had ADHD, autism, or both, rain meant something magical was about to happen. Noah was the first to notice. He was supposed to be solving a fraction problem, but instead, he was laser-focused on the drops racing down the window like tiny wet comets. "It's raining," he whispered, eyes wide with excitement. That's all it took. Sophie, the human tornado, jumped out of her seat and yelled, "Puddles!" like a battle cry. Ethan, who had been stimming with a fidget cube, immediately ditched it and started bouncing in his chair. "Rainwalk, rainwalk, rainwalk!" Carson, bless her patient soul, barely blinked. She knew us too well. Instead of trying to wrangle us back to math, she did what any genius teacher would do: grabbed the emergency stash of raincoats and shouted, "All right, everyone, shoes on. Let's go splashing." Within 2 minutes, the entire class was outside in the schoolyard. It wasn't just raining anymore, it was pouring. Fat, drenching drops that turned the ground into a playground of mud and puddles. Instant chaos. Mason, our resident sensory seeker, threw himself into the biggest puddle he could find and just laid there like a content sea otter. Olivia, who usually avoided messy stuff, found a rain gutter dripping water and turned it into a precision-based drinking fountain. Miss Carson stopped her just in time. Someone, probably Felix, because of course it was Felix, started a full-on puddle-kicking battle that quickly escalated into a who can get the muddiest competition. Spoiler: we all won. Meanwhile, Noah, the original rain whisperer, stood with his face turned up to the sky, hands out like he was absorbing the storm's energy. "This is the best sensory input ever," he sighed dreamily. At some point, the principal came outside, took one look at the drenched, chaotic, joyful mess that was room 12, and just shook his head. "Carson, this is your problem now." Ms. Carson just shrugged. "At least they're not bouncing off the walls inside." Eventually, we had to go back in. We left wet, giggling, covered in mud, and completely unbothered by the fact that we smelled like wet dogs. Ms. Carson made us change into our emergency clothes, handed out warm cocoa, and let us dry off while watching a documentary about dolphins, because dolphins also like splashing, so it felt right. By the time our parents picked us up, we were exhausted, happy, and possibly more water than human. The next day, Miss Carson walked into class and found a sign taped to the board. "Rule 1. If it rains, we go outside." She didn't even argue. She just smiled and said, "Deal."